Hello and welcome everybody to the Kairos Pacific University podcast. I'm your host, Rita Sekali, and today I have an exceptional guest with me. Our guest today is Dr. Pete Patitas, and he is an emergency medicine physician, a researcher, and the creator of the Athos Diet, which we're going to talk about at length today. But I want to tell you that he had quite a journey with fasting, with everything that brings us like good, wholesome meals, I suppose. I want to say it that way. And his research is founded in the traditions of Mount Athos. So before I tell you who he is and more about him, I actually want to take a moment to say hello. So hi, Dr. Pete. How you doing today?
Hi, Rita. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. Excited to be chatting with someone on the West Coast. I'm here in cooler Pennsylvania, but I'm just so happy we can connect today. It's wonderful.
I am too. It's so excited to actually have you with us because I'm super excited for our conversation. And I think I've told you this already a bunch of times, mainly because your diet comes and it's based on Christian values and Christian beliefs. And also it comes from the Eastern churches, which I'm very proudly a part of as well because of my heritage and because of where I'm from. And so I want to leave the floor to you. So I'm not going to talk a lot about the diet itself, but I want you first and foremost to tell me where or what or who is Athos.
Yeah, sure.
Or tell our audience.
No, that is a great way to start off the conversation. I mean, I think in general, there's sort of this hunger and thirst for Christians across the world to understand better what that early church looked like and what did they preach and what did they promote. Because we all want to get as close to Jesus as possible. You know, if we could just speak to him directly right now, we might just find ourselves, a little bit more clarity in this time of confusion, in this time of numerous options. It's overwhelming. So when it comes to things like Christian fasting in particular, I think that it's very important to emphasize that there is a tradition that goes back many millennia. I mean, 2,000 years, I would argue, that really tells people how to live a Christian life in very practical ways. And there really is nothing more core than, when we eat, how we eat, and what we eat. And that religions all over the world, whether they be Christian or not, tend to press this button a lot when it comes to guiding their believers in a certain way. And for some reason, it's more intuitive, but as a doc, I can tell you probably why that is. It's more intuitive that they sort of recognize, hey, if we're going to sort of reach the soul, we probably need to optimize and modify our diet a little bit. So fast forward now to 2025, and we're kind of looking back at everything in hindsight. And the reality is that there are Christian traditions out there that really pride themselves on being ancient, and it looks ancient and it feels ancient. And I guess in this case, it tastes ancient. And one of these communities is called Mount Athos. And Mount Athos is a peninsula in eastern Greece. It is a community of about 23 or more monasteries and smaller monasteries that surround it. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site because it's so beautiful and so historic. I've been there. And it is a place where monks, particularly men, actually, because believe it or not, only men are allowed to be there. But they practice a certain way of living that is quite amazing and quite mysterious and quite ascetical. And I'd like to emphasize that the root word of exercise and asceticism is based in the Greek, and they're very much interrelated. So we recognize already that to be spiritual, you must be ascetical, and it is an exercise. There's a certain degree of struggle that comes with it. In case this struggle is not just a masochism or a sadism, it is a practice that makes the body healthier, the spirit stronger, and gives us clarity in our lives. And so Mount Athos has been practicing a certain way of fasting that doesn't just regulate what they eat, not just how much they eat, but when in particular they eat. And it's so amazing because as you're trying to align our lives, not just month to month or year to year with Christ, this tradition allows us to really resonate our very hours of our day with a certain spiritual Christian tempo. Mm-hmm. And so many of these monks don't eat until the 9th hour, which is when Christ was crucified. They don't eat until communion is provided. which is, of course, the pinnacle of the service for the liturgies that these monks have every day. And there's a certain degree of reverse engineering that goes into preparing for those moments. Things like confession, things like prayer, things like good works and almsgiving. And if you have all these things aligned, you very well might be blessed with the ability to have a communion or to break the fast in the 9th hour. And if you do this every day, you essentially are going without food for so long throughout the day. Usually it's, maybe it's between 16 and 20 hours, that you are essentially intermittent fasting, which of course is a very big buzz term right now. But that intermittent fasting carries with it a powerful physiological punch. But what I want to emphasize is that for the monks, and I think many things are this way, for the monks, they're not trying to optimize calories and their physiology. That just comes with the territory. That comes with the engineering that Christ has taught us as to how to live a good, spiritually sound, healthy life. And so what comes with the medicine is the sweetness of longevity, of functionality, of health span. And this book sort of explores that connection between, let's call it, early Christian fasting and the medical benefits that surround it. And I am very happy to say that as our Christ, as our leader in our faith, Jesus himself, he commands us many, many times in the Old and New Testament to fast. And if the world took this seriously, people would live 40% longer than their average person next to them that's not. And they would sidestep probably about 90% of disease, if not more. And to me, the proof is in the pudding. And these individuals at Mount Athos, these monks in particular, who kind of look like Gandalf, if you can connect it to maybe figures that we're sort of more familiar with, they are living well into their 80s and 90s with very few diseases, if any. And they're living long lives, meaningful lives. And it all begins with this practice of Christian fasting.
So there's a few things that I absolutely love the overview that you just gave us. It's so beautiful. There's so much to go into. I want to start back at Mount Athos. So Mount Athos is, as you said, it's this place in Greece. It's no women are allowed, and it's not a sexist type of situation. It's really a prayer-filled place where anything that could remotely tempt the eye is kind of not there, right? What do you think is the relation between spirituality and fasting? So I know that people who are listening today, they want to have a good diet. They may want to lose weight. They want to do all this stuff. But what I'm hearing from you is these monks, they ask for the kingdom of heaven in a sense, and everything else is added on.
Yes.
And so what's the relation between not eating so much and spirituality, and which one should come first?
Yeah, it's such a great question to ask, because oftentimes, I think we polarize things. It's kind of like in the modern day when we talk about being a jock or a nerd, and we sort of say, hey, you can be one or the other. And I say, well, why not just be both? And the reason I bring that up is a lot of people will say, well, if we're focused on the temple of the soul rather than the soul itself, are we sort of ignoring the soul? If we focus too much on this body that we've been given, is perhaps it's all an exercise in vanity. And the reality is that there is a mind, body, soul connection that is historic, it's ancient. And if you really recognize that interplay, there's a lot of soul spiritual progress that can be made through the practice of living in this human body. And what I mean by that is, there was an old tradition in the ancient churches called Gnosticism. And Gnosticism basically was very anti-creation. It was very anti the body. And everything was sort of seen as like in this hyperbole of the soul. You are a ghost that's trapped in a body. And if we could only get rid of our bodies, we'd be even closer to God. And there's a certain yearning that we all have where the soul wants to be around those spiritual things, no doubt. But the reality is that God himself became man and took on flesh and participated in this creation in such a direct way and literally blessed the waters of the earth and the creation that we're in. And so there's this interplay. In fact, you might even say that through creation, God became man so that we could better know God. I mean, did we know that there was a Trinity prior to Jesus Christ becoming human flesh and on this earth as a human being. And so the reality is that as we sort of see creation in the way that it's supposed to be understood, we actually get stronger spiritual insights. So Jesus becomes man, takes on flesh. Now we know there's a Trinity. Now we know there's a Holy Spirit and a Son of God. And so this is sort of the tempo that I think we should understand this practice of fasting, the temples of our souls for. So let me say this. In the ancient church, in the ancient Christian church, there was a huge emphasis on fasting. And if you look back to these various readings and traditions across the globe, oftentimes, this might sound very stringent, oftentimes, even as early as 7 years of age, the early church would ask people to do one thing in particular, which was do not eat anything with meat or dairy in it for certain parts of the year. So these monks of Mount Athos carry on that same tradition. And in fact, the Orthodox Church itself in modern day times also emphasizes this tradition. And it's not just once a week on Fridays, or it's not just a few times a year. It's actually the majority of the year. Maybe sometimes, depending on the year, up to 200 days or more in a year. And so imagine you're a 7-year-old who is being asked, you know what, in this day and age of processed foods, hyperpalatable substances, etc., we want you at the age of 7 to say no. We want you at the age of 7 to say you're not going to have dairy or meat or anything that includes that. And what happens? And again, the first thing first, you're like, oh, well, that person needs to fast because there's some spiritual connection. We don't know what we mean by that. There's an intuition, there's a connection, but what is that connection? And so this is the connection. This is the bridge. The bridge is something like this. You're 7 years of age and it's a Wednesday, and you know that you're not supposed to have meat or dairy. And of course, it just so happens that little Johnny in your, second grade class or first grade class is bringing in the best freaking cupcakes you've ever seen, filled with as much dairy product as you can imagine. And unfortunately, you're not supposed to participate in that. And so you lean over and there's all these cupcakes meant just for you, and you say no. And what does that do to a 7-year-old? First of all, a 7-year-old doesn't have the cerebral power to understand the lessons and the logic and the intellectualism of this practice, the physiology, etc. But they have an enteric nervous system and anatomy that's quite complex, that lines their gut, that makes fasting and denying of food a very visceral experience. So they're not learning right now, they're feeling. That's all you can ask a child to do, is to feel and to sort of battle with those feelings. And I can tell you about the anatomy of why this is such a core aspect of us. But imagine this child at 7 years of age is able to overcome something like not eating something that it wants to. What has it learned? Delayed gratification, patience, discipline, an extended time horizon, a prioritization of what's important and what's transient. If you can teach a 7-year-old that, and maybe over the course of several years, at the late age of 10, they finally get it right, then you have taught that 10-year-old how to be an employee, a leader, a CEO, a member of their community that understands patience, delayed gratification, that delayed time horizon, all these aspects, all these virtues that are going to be useful in all aspects of life. So if I can get an entire society to do that and to get it right eventually as they're a child, what won't they able to conquer and overcome as an adult when it really matters? And so this is the bridge. And finally, I'll just say this, and we can go into this in more detail because this is what I really enjoy and I nerd out about, is that it's because your intestine has 100 million neurons and 100 trillion bacteria, and is one of the most sensitive organs and the most metabolically active system in your body relative to other things, or one of the more metabolically systems in your body. There's such a central core to who you are. When I start talking about food and this denial, you are pressing on the most core aspects of who you are. So that if I can have you do this as a child, you aren't just practicing something that's kind of like in the periphery, but something that's very core to you, and I can make fundamental change. And so that's why there's a spiritual connection to something like fasting, because our anatomy screams it, the spiritual historical record screams it, and I can teach a child not through an intellectual pursuit, but through something so visceral and so real and so core to us. And that's the beauty of fasting. It hits us where it matters, and it makes all the difference. And so we spiritually progress.
Again, it's so important, informative. There's so much to take in. I want to maybe go to a little bit of a more personal side. You grew up in the Orthodox Church, the Antiochian Orthodox or the Greek Orthodox Church. And you had these, I want to call them rules. They're not necessarily rules as if they're not breakable.
Right.
But you had those since you were a kid. Did you live them out all throughout your life? And I believe you have kids.
Yeah.
Right? You have little ones as well. And I know you're teaching them that. So I want to ask you, comparatively, how did you live that out as a child, and what did it do to you? And then how are you seeing the benefit of it in your kids? Because in today's world, we just want to gratify the children. We're like,
right.
No, they want this. I want to give it to them. They want candy. I want to give them candy. So it's very hard to get a kid to become disciplined in saying no. So where have you seen that implementing this particular diet, for lack of a better word on my end, this particular practice, spiritual practice and diet, play into your kids, and how did it play in your life as well?
Yeah, well, I'll just say this. I think fasting comes in many formats, and if you can create just enough friction to feel that sense of self-denial, then you've achieved something there. And the further you go in that spectrum, the more return on investment you'll get. I'll also say this too, is that as an emergency medicine doc, you see the connection all the time between delayed gratification and literally death. And so as a physician, you start to understand that the stakes are very high. And it's very easy in the 21st century to think that we're so civilized and so developed and so well off that many of these tragedies will never strike us until you arrive in my ER. And so what I'll tell you is I've seen this happen all the time in my emergency department, where people are unmasked, where they have tragedies they've never dealt with before, for their children, for themselves, for their parents, grandparents. And it's a strange thing, to be honest. Delayed gratification is something that can save lives. And I'll give you an example of this. Some time ago, I had an example of a toddler who was essentially dying from pneumonia. And this toddler showed up with their parents in our emergency room, in our waiting room and registered. And it was very clear just from me looking at the board here that there was this child with very bad vital signs. Okay. So your oxygen should be, 94% or higher for a child, maybe even higher than that. Well, on room air, this child was like down in the 80s. So they're literally drowning in front of us. So I go out there to take care of the child immediately. And you might say, well, what's wrong with that? The problem is there are other people in the waiting room. And those other people in the waiting room wanted their concerns to be addressed first. And they might have had a bruised elbow. They might have had, problems going to the bathroom. But you know what? That's not as important as the child who's drowning in front of them. Now, you would say here in this controlled environment, yes, it's obvious everyone in the waiting room should just let this toddler go forward. You would not believe how much anger, resentment, profanity there was of people watching this child die in front of them, and they wanted their concerns taken care of first. I'll tell you, I don't think those people fasted at a young age. I don't think they really understand what delayed gratification is. I don't think they understand what it means to be disciplined and to not give in to impulse. I need something right now. In this case, it was help, and I understand that. But you know what? There was something more important to be patient for at that moment, and that was let a little toddler have a chance to live the rest of their life and not drown from this infection. Essentially, I use the word drowning, but the point is that this delayed gratification has huge implications, not just on the success of your life, but maybe even letting a person next to you who's not doing so well get some care before you. Okay, so my father was an eye surgeon, and he was a Greek Orthodox priest. So in our faith tradition, they can marry, and marry he did, and he had 5 children. And so not only was he a priest that could give people spiritual counsel, but he could relate with his people. He could relate with them because he's been up at night changing diapers, going to work tired, giving that last piece of food that he wanted to eat to his kids so that they had a little bit more, so when he didn't. And so that was the framework that I was raised in. And so when I was 7, my father just did what Orthodox Christians have been doing for 2,000 years, which is, you're 7 and it's time that you learn a little delayed gratification through something that really was going to matter. So I can tell you this, I'm 40 now, but I guess in my 33 years of fasting, I've probably broken the fast, other than like forgetting that it was a Friday and like, oh yeah, I'm going down to the fridge to get my normal something, probably twice in my life. And I'll tell you, for whatever reason, and I'm not sure how my parents succeeded doing this so well, but I just had this strong belief that at 7, like, this is what I just had to do. And I didn't understand the physiology. I didn't understand the spiritual benefit. I just knew it was a rule, and I did what my parents asked me to do. And of course, in the Old Testament, they say that, those that respect their parents will live a long life. I mean, it's one of these, sort of epic quotes from the Old Testament. And there's some truth to that. And so for whatever reason, at 7, I just knew that was the thing I had to do. It's kind of like, all birds fly eventually because mom and dad did. I guess I'm a dolphin. I'm supposed to swim. I guess I'm a bird. I'm supposed to fly. And they just kind of eventually do it. Do they know why they're doing it? It doesn't matter. Get over yourself. You just do it. And so when you test this tradition out over and over again over centuries, you start to realize some pretty amazing things. And what I can tell you, looking back, at this retrospectively, is that there is incredible benefits spiritually, medically, to all of this. And it comes with the territory, and it's an absolutely beautiful thing. And it's such a Christian, meek phenomenon that something so simple would result in so much good and so much virtue, not just in terms of weight loss and your telomere length, which we can talk about, but also in terms of your ability to succeed in every aspect of your life. Because all of these things touch on these virtues. And if you want to learn them, then feel them as a child. And so that's what I did. And I, maybe an example I can bring up. I mean, there were plenty of opportunities to pick a girl or a girlfriend that was kind of not someone I should be hanging out with. But you know what? I understood what delayed gratification was. I understood that waiting for the right meal is better than just snacking on crap until then. And so, I say this kind of in an inflammatory way, but I feel like it's lost all too long. There are huge stakes in who you marry. And there's a huge, these things that you prepare for your whole life, you need to prepare for them in little microcosms until then. And something I learned at a very young age was, I wanted to wait for her and her with like a capital H, and she was going to be a 10 out of 10, and I was going to make it so. And so I waited and 18 years later, actually coming this 2nd of September, I've been married. But could I have been distracted with someone else? Could I have just like screwed around with, odd figures in my life over decades? Like, I guess is more socially acceptable right now, I guess. But you know what? It's better to wait. It's better to wait for the right food. It's better to wait for the right something and not waste your time. And in this case, calories, or in this case, bad nutrition, or in this case, the wrong partner for your life. And I learned that theme and that principle at a very early age. And I've taken that practice through everything I've ever done, whether it's becoming a medical doctor, having kids, finding the right wife, et cetera, et cetera. And so this is how it started for me.
It's so many of the things you said resonate so much in my life. One of the things is actually when I was younger, also, it was the entire society's norm was to fast at least in Lebanon, in the Middle East. Yeah. And so everywhere you'd go, like everyone was fasting. And I experienced the same thing. I don't know why I did it. I just knew that it was good. I wanted to fast. I wanted to be there and I wanted to partake in this. And I think there's an aspect that people don't realize. In the gospel, it says some things don't come out except through prayers and fasting. Mm-hmm. And then you have to stop and think, well, how is my fasting going to help someone else? How is that relevant to the person next to me? one, you could offer up your suffering, but that's a whole other topic. But truly what happens when we fast, and as you've explained so beautifully, is that we are reset so that our focus is now on Christ. And if my focus is on him and I'm pursuing him, then I'm able to help someone else because I'm more Christ-like.
Yeah, and let me make this transitive property of mathematics even more clear. So if I am fasting for myself, that's called a diet. Okay, that's a gimmick, that's an infomercial, and it doesn't work, evidently, because evidently Americans love to spend about $60 billion a year on infomercials and weight loss stuff. And it's for them. Okay. If I fast for Christ and I'm doing it for God, then when we read the New Testament passage that says, when Christ asks, who is my neighbor? Like when he says, if you do it unto these, the least of my brethren, you do it unto me. So what I'm trying to say is, if I fast for Christ, then I can also do something for my neighbor. And so this is the property. This is the connection. Is that if I just do things for me, I don't really know if I can do it for other people. I don't really know if I can struggle for them, sacrifice for them, do things for them. But if I can do it for God, and God to some extent in helping him is like helping my neighbor, like all those things are equivalent, then suddenly I've made that connection. And so this is again why societies and communities that fast are more likely to help one another. Because you're doing it for something outside of yourself. And again, at an early age. I mean, it's a fascinating thing to me. I think the United States spends more on healthcare than any other country on the earth. And it's multiples more than other countries spend. Yet its outcomes are either equivalent or less than all those other countries. And so, I wonder sometimes these societies that have these very tight-knit communities and they're very spiritually based. Is there something about there's something about that cocktail or that chemistry or that cultural norm where it's very spiritually centered that then translates to taking care of people in ways that help them recover from disease or prevent it in the first place? I can tell you right now, again, going back to the emergency department, a lot of the things that we supply in the ER are just things that, like, if family still was kind of tribal, they wouldn't be in the ER. Especially when it comes to elderly people. I mean, or even children for that matter. There's sort of this realm that people have forgotten about, which is like just being a good parent or being a good grandchild or child for that matter, for their family, that if you gave them the food and the Tylenol and the water and the electrolytes and just simple supportive care, things wouldn't then snowball into full out infections that cause all sorts of havoc. And now you're in my ER. I remember talking to a lady once. I thought she had a brilliant point. She's like, with the destruction of the family unit, people don't have their grandmothers to tell them when their child is sick anymore. And so I have all these parents coming into the ER at 3 a.m. because little Johnny has a fever, 101 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm like, guys, am I like a bad parent? I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have taken my child to the ER. I love my child. But not for a fever. Fever's normal. Fever's the way that you get better. And so in some ways, I feel like because that those children, unfortunately, and it's not their fault, but those children don't have grandparents around that can give this insight that, this will pass too. And we know what this little one needs is a little bit of Tylenol, a little bit of Motrin, a little bit of water to get them through it. And they're going to be better in 36 hours. And so anyway, what I'm trying to say is that a lot of these things come down to such subtle little micro wins that then prevent all sorts of bad things snowballing into effect. And so, again, if you could do it for God, you can do it for your neighbor. And if you have a spiritual core that's really ripe and vibrant, this manifests and waterfalls into every aspect of your life. And it manifests in things that truly can prevent things like death, but also can truly prevent things like financial crisis, which is what we definitely are in America right now, given the debts that we have and the healthcare crisis that we're undergoing.
On to the topic of what it does for you, or doing this for God. There's one thing that I want to say that is hopefully in addition to what you're saying for people who are listening. When we say we do this for the sake of Christ, Christ doesn't quote unquote need me to fast. Like
Sure.
he's sustained, right? He is God. There's nothing that he needs from me, right? But it's selling everything for the sake of entering into the kingdom of heaven today, because the kingdom of heaven is at hand. And so when we fast for Christ, we are really fasting so that we can enter into the kingdom of heaven in a way that is wholesome. So which I think matches well with what you're saying as well. I want to shift a little bit of gears to go to the actual diet portion of it. What does it entail? What does it look like? How can someone, start it? What do they need to do?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this first and foremost, this idea of just denying yourself enough to learn the principle is valid. But what I also want to emphasize is that you can do Christian fasting wrong and then leave a lot of let's call it money on the table. And what I mean by that is, let's take, for example, I was 7 and I didn't know anything about the Athos diet at that point, right? But I was fasting and I had no meat, I had no dairy, and I was eating all day long, snacking all day long, eating as much white bread and candy as I wanted. And candy, again, as long as it didn't have dairy, it was fine. I could eat whatever I wanted. And that was the parameters I got. And granted, I had some spiritual benefit from that. There was a certain degree of value in that. But what I'm trying to tell people is if you're going to do fasting anyway, let's also carry with it the other prongs, which is based on these monastic communities across the world that are quite ancient, where now you also get a physiological benefit. So that I'm not giving you, diabetes from eating white bread and candy for the next 50 years of your life all day long. That's not good for you. And so this is why I feel like the Athos diet is so essential to appreciate, because you might be giving something up for God, and that's fine, but I want you to have these silos resonate with one another, the spiritual and the physical, the soul and the body. And so that when they work together, they resonate and you get all sorts of benefits. So you, of course, get the spiritual benefit. But now we can talk about how it sort of echoes a physiological benefit. And so the diet itself is 3 prongs. First and foremost, it's no meat, no dairy for certain parts of the year. The Athos diet itself mimics Great Lent. So it's a 48-day fast. For 48 days, no meat, no dairy. You're kind of like a vegan, okay?
So just sorry to break this up. The Great Lent is the Lent that comes right before Easter, and it's 48 days because Jesus fasted for 40 days, and then we account for the week, the Holy Week.
That's right. That's exactly right. The 40 days is in there, and then there's sort of this big preparation for when Christ is sort of going through his passion, as we call it. And so we get to 48 days. And I bring up maybe one thing more about this timeline. I mean, it's so key. Again, I'm talking as an ER doc. The studies show that people who actually undertake a vegan diet for as little as 40 days reverse and can decrease a lot of their risk factors for death. I mean, who's to say that grandma and grandpa are going to be there for Easter this year, or that you will be? And what has God done? He's engineered into this liturgical, this calendar, the spiritual calendar, let's call it, an opportunity for you to be well and to heal, so that when it comes to the celebration of Christ's resurrection, you're not at a funeral. And I see this in the ER. People die all the time on the holidays. Why do we think that we're so immune from that? Well, I can tell you that through this 48 days of preparation, there's a lot of things you can reverse in the toxicity of your body to make sure you're there. So why would we want to confuse the world? We're celebrating Christ's resurrection. Meanwhile, I'm burying grandmother or grandfather. Very confusing. So let's not do that. So I just want to emphasize that the 48 days is not by accident. The second,
and then it's also repeated in 4 cycles throughout the year for the most part. So it repeats with the 4 Lents that are, it's not called Lent, but for the 4 fasting seasons.
Yes, that's right.
Years, right.
So
you have the Apostles' fast, the Marian fast, the Christmas fast and then the Great Lent is
exactly
part of the liturgical calendar.
And the Athos Diet itself as a book concept is just 48 days. But I tell people afterwards, hey, there's this worked out progression throughout the year where you're fasting Wednesday, Fridays, and these 4 fasts you just so perfectly mentioned that also keep you on a nice little reset. You know, there's plenty of celebration. I tell people all the time, I'm the biggest carnivore in the world. I mean, but the thing is I've tasted more of the meat I've eaten than people have ever eaten. What I mean to say by that is, like, when you go through these cycles, you are just so in the moment when you are so grateful and so excited to eat this new food, but it's dynamic, just like seasons on earth, just like the fact there's a winter and a summer. I mean, we're not meant to do the same thing every day all the time. I don't think that's healthy. And by all means, you know, people get some benefit when they're just so unhealthy by being ketogenic and eating meat all the time. I mean, there's some value to that when you're 600 pounds trying to get down to 150. By all means, let's do an economia for that, as we say. Let's give some exceptions to get you to a proper frame of health so you can participate in this new way of living for the rest of your life, because, you know, the stakes are high then. But for the average individual, the person who's growing up in the Christian faith, the person who's trying to do sort of motorcycle maintenance throughout their whole life, you know, this is the tempo. So it's this vegan approach to diet for that period of time, 48 days straight in this book. The second part, though, is very important.
And the book is called The Athos Diet, for reference.
That's right, The Athos Diet. That's
the one right behind you.
That's right.
Okay.
Yes. The Athos Diet is exactly this Christian fasting done right, okay? Done in an optimized way. So the second part, though, is very important, and it is an intermittent fasting portion. And this is something that was never emphasized to me until I discovered it myself, which is that as you look at these practices of the monks and in these communities throughout the world, they oftentimes don't eat until 2 key events. One is they won't eat until 3 p.m., because that's when Christ was crucified on the cross and ultimately died, the 9th hour, as we call it, 3 p.m. So they're not eating. Now, again, they're not trying to intermittent fast. They're just trying to struggle with Christ, you know, to be there with him, to live in his tempo. It's a beautiful thing. So 3 p.m., boom, they can start eating. Second is they try not to eat anything before communion. And this is something that many monasteries have a liturgy or a service every day where they are getting communion. They're not supposed to eat before then. Again, did they know that was intermittent fasting? No. But the point is that as they prepare for communion and as they prepare for that 3 p.m. marker, they are intermittent fasting. And what comes with that is literally a 40% longevity boost. Like, if you take any mammal on earth and you make them intermittent fast, they live 40% longer. And then you have to ask yourself, well, how is that possible? Like, is it just magic? Well, no. What comes with that is a host of physiological processes that literally result in healing of the body. And so this is a beautiful thing. And then the final prong of the diet is essentially just emphasizing that walking it's just so simple and so accessible. But walking 30 minutes a day is like one of the greatest forms of exercise you can do. I mean, there's so many complex interventions, and you can always do more. But I tell people, for 30 minutes a day, I want you to walk. And that's also very beneficial. And I try in the book to show how these 3 pillars of the Athos Diet result in huge medical benefit. And as I mentioned, that results in a 40% lengthening of your life, and potentially, if you do it early enough, consistently enough, sidestepping 90% of disease, because all of it's preventable through these 3 things.
How do you ensure that you're getting the right nutrients after? So we talk about the vegan diet. It's actually in a lot of ways, it's very hard to accomplish. One, how do you ensure that you're getting the right foods? And then 2, if you're fasting for that long, till about 3, I know from like my personal experience around Lent, when I'm like pushing the fasting, it gets a little, like, I want to say foggy or a little like dizzy towards, you know, the time where I'm about to eat. How do you deal with that?
Yeah.
When you maybe you're a mom, or maybe you're a dad, or you have work and you have things to do.
First, I want us to build ourselves up with the idea that God made us as the pinnacle of creation. Okay. So, Adam was made in the Garden of Eden, and he was this extraordinary mastery of let's say life's creation. And so it's very important, and maybe this isn't something to be proud of, but the average American has between 50 and 60 pounds of fat on their body that's excess. So I'm not joking. When I say that you could live 3 months without food, you can live 3 months without food. And in fact, historically, we know that the person in the Guinness World Record, he was a Scotsman. He lived over a year without any food. It was water and vitamins. So we don't even know our own power. Okay, we don't even know our own power. So when I tell you we can do this every 24 hours, you're gonna be fine. And so with that said, there is a way to make those 24 hours more optimal. And I can tell you that takes some fine tuning. But one way or another, I guarantee you, you're not going to crash. You're not going to crash doing this every 24 hours. Waiting 16 hours to eat or even 20 hours to eat each day is not a problem, as long as you're getting the proper nutrition in that eating window. So what I tell people in the Athos diet, and again, this mimics the early Christian fast that were recommended, you're eating between 8 and 4 hours a day, which means you're not eating 16 and 20 hours a day. But let's just take the most basic parameter. Let's say you're only eating 8 hours a day. Basically means your first meal is at 10 a.m. and you stop eating by 6. I mean, that doesn't sound too terrible. And then what I also tell people is in that eating window, you have to get at least 100 grams of protein, at least. So there's no upper limit. You could go higher, but I want you to get at least 100 grams. And then at the same time, we're cutting our carbs to about 130 grams a day. And you don't have to be, too obsessed about these macronutrients, but I'm giving you parameters to understand where the value is. And then you can understand too that I don't even talk about fat. There's no limit on the amount of fat that you can consume. But if it's from a vegan source, if it's high in protein, low in carbs, and whatever the fat is, you're doing great. And so if you're eating enough protein and you're eating enough fat in your eating window, that will carry you through the next 16 to 20 hours. And maybe it's worth mentioning here, the average human body has about 1 pound to 2 pounds of glycogen throughout their muscle tissue and their liver. This is important because that glycogen represents sugar, carbohydrates essentially, in one form or another, stored, but it's that essentially when it's released. So by the time you go through 12 to 16 hours, you've run through all that. And now you're switching over to ketosis, which is basically your body breaking down fat. And the reality is your brain loves fat. It loves ketones. It actually runs more optimally. It has lower inflammation, has low oxidative stress when you're eating more protein, more fat, and less carbs. And we are a carbohydrate crazed society. There's too much of that in everything. And so then the next question you said was, well, how do you ensure you're getting enough fat and protein? Well, I'll tell you, there's a lot of options. One is that shrimp is always allowed through octopus, shrimp. It's always allowed throughout the fast, okay? But
does that include other fish like salmon and?
So for the 48 days, I say that you shouldn't be having any fish. But there are periods of time throughout the year where there are fasts that allow that. But for the 48 days, as just a program, let's say, of really intense fasting, I say no fish in that case. But then there are plants that have very high amounts of protein. Let me give you an example. People think about protein coming from eggs or coming from Greek yogurt or coming from steak, okay? I'm going to do some quick math for you. So if you eat an egg, you have to consume 12 calories to get 1 gram of protein. 12 calories, 1 gram of protein, okay? This says nothing about the fat content or the carb content or I'm just saying 12 calories for one thing of protein, okay? If you eat lentils, it's 13 to 1. That's actually not that bad. It takes 1 extra calorie to get some protein. That's not terrible. If you eat spirulina, the ratio there is 6 to 1. So you're actually getting more protein by eating spirulina, which is a plant-derived form of protein, than you are eggs. Well, eat all the spirulina you want. Hemp is 5 to 1.
Hold on, I have to look up what spirulina is.
Yeah, it comes from plants. Take a look.
Okay. So it's like a supplement kind of thing.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so
I've never seen this plant in my kitchen. I don't know what you're talking about.
No, spirulina, it's a powder. Pea protein, again, it's similar ratios, very high. Hemp powder, very high, 5 to 1. So better than eggs. is actually better than Greek yogurt. So we think to ourselves, oh, I'm going to get the 0% yogurt. I'm going to up the protein and just be like a star. Well, hemp powder is actually higher than Greek yogurt. And then, if you want something that has a little bit more body and fiber to it, you can always go lentils. Lentil soup is amazing, very healthy for you. And, not to get too medical on you, because I see these things all the time. It probably grosses everyone else out. But I can't tell you how many old people come in at 4 a.m. by ambulance for constipation in the ER. 4 a.m. Okay. So the point is that lentil soup is like a universal, amazing option. The lentils themselves, very healthy, and they will keep you moving through your life in your decades. And they're high in protein. They're low in calories relative to the content. So I'm just giving you examples. There's also
have that list in the book. It has a list of these things where you can find
there is, and actually my YouTube channel also explores this in more detail as well. And the book has 48 recipes at the end of it that kind of say, hey, if you want to eat something useful that day, here's an idea. But you can always then supplement whatever you're doing with some hemp powder or some pea protein, spirulina, etc. And then the shrimp thing is a game changer. I mean, I actually have a friend of mine who's a bodybuilder, and he is the most jacked dude I've ever met, fasting, and he's just going all out shrimp the entire Lent. And I mean, he doesn't.
Why shrimp?
Why shrimp?
Yeah. Why is it different than fish?
It's funny. Again, this is oral tradition, but you're allowed to eat shrimp during the Lenten. It was considered an untouchable food in the Old Testament. You weren't even allowed to eat it. In the New Testament, all things were allowed, but for the fast, they would allow shrimp, but not fish. Now there are fasts in the Eastern Orthodox tradition that include fish, where you can have it rather.
The one we just passed, the one that was in August.
For part of it, and also the Apostles' fast in summer, and the fast during the Christmas season. The reality is I think that happens is because there's a lot more fat content in fish, and you need some of that when it gets cold during the winter times. There's also different like Russian and more like higher latitude traditions that allow fish more frequently throughout the year, where it's just so cold. Not everyone gets blessed with dry heat like in Greece and the Middle East,
like in California.
That's right, or California for that matter. So, but anyway, I bring this all up to say this is very accessible, very reasonable, and very inexpensive. I mean, a lot of these things lentils are nothing. So if you can stay disciplined and eat in this way, shape, and form, where not only are you eating in a vegan way with high protein, but you're only eating during a certain period of the day. This is the next key point, which is that when you eat for only 4 to 8 hours a day, your body starts releasing things like growth hormone that keep your muscles intact, that give you more energy. Your sympathetic nervous system, which lines all of your gut, I told you had 100 million neurons on there, that actually starts to upregulate things like adrenaline, epinephrine, serotonin, dopamine. All of these things are actually funny medications that help kids with ADHD and anxiety and depression. I mean, isn't it fascinating that you get an increase of those neurotransmitters just from fasting? We don't even need the pharmacies anymore. Just fast, people, every day. Yeah. And so this is the key, is that when I was a kid, I was eating vegan stuff all day long. I didn't care about the protein. I was snacking all day. I felt like crap all day long. Now, because of discipline, I just did it, but I wasn't feeling good. You start doing this right. And this is where in the New Testament, God says, when you fast, don't cover yourself in ash and look morose. Cover yourself in oil, look radiant. And what I would take that a second step. I would say the litmus test for whether or not you're fasting right or not is if you feel radiant. If people see you during the fast and like, is this guy like supposed to be struggling right now, or is he just like soaring? And this comes with the territory. So yes, if you're fasting, don't look morose. Don't feel morose. If you're doing that, you're doing something wrong. And this is where the Athos Diet can come in and say, hey, if you want to be the most productive you've ever been in your life, so you can pray more and be more productive and help your neighbor, fast in this way, fast in this cadence. And of course, you're getting the spiritual benefit, but now your community improves. You improve. Your family improves. Like, you are a mover and shaker of your community, and you are on fire. And so this just comes with it. It's so brilliant. And the final thing I'll say, not the final thing, but another thing just to top it off is that if you're trying to align your life with God, not just your life in terms of its professional status or your house or where you live, but literally every cell of your body is singing to the highest good, to Christ himself, fast. Every cell in your body is now aligned and in synchrony with grace. I mean, it's so ingenious. It's so ingenious. It's so simple. And we've completely forgotten this in the Western world. And it's time to bring it back. It's time to bring it back for all sorts of reasons. There's a business case for it where you're just like, by all means, if you're gonna downgrade this just as an infomercial thing, okay, there's some benefit there, but you won't last. You won't last. You have to do this all the time. It's a lifestyle. It's something you need to do all year long. And for 48 days, we try to do it more intensely. But this way, you're reaping the benefits spiritually and bodily, and you have a beautiful temple. And when you are resurrected, it is not just a resurrection of the soul. It is a resurrection of the body as well. We're supposed to take good care of our bodies. There's something about creation that's supposed to be sanctified. And so this is just one of those steps in getting there.
There are so many instances to just say, praise God. Like, look at the fruits or when they grow in their seasons. It's just it's so fascinating to me. It's like, oh, you need vitamin C in the winter? Here's some oranges. You know what I mean? Like, God planned all of this in accordance, and it's
his engineering.
So
yes, it's his engineering. Yeah. And I don't think we should criticize the maker for like, oh, well, your fasting practice makes you healthier and extends your life and makes you able to take care of your grandkids. What? Like, why is that a bad thing? That's what God created. Like, why are we criticizing that as if like somehow you're less than authentic if you're not just suffering and miserable? What are you talking about?
Yeah, no,
I don't understand it.
It's so beautiful. It's very true. For people who I don't know if you guys do this as well in Greece, but in Lebanon, we have something called atah. And so and we share a lot of our food with, at the Mediterranean coast. Almost every version of our food has a vegan version. Mm-hmm. And the reason for that is because of the Wednesday, Friday fast that happened throughout like history in the region. And so it's called atah, which means abstaining, which is what you do when you are fasting. You abstain from certain foods.
Yeah.
And so all the Mediterranean, I don't know how high protein they are, right? But there is, in the Mediterranean diet, you'll find that there is a vegan version of almost everything that there is. And I'm pretty sure it's the same in Greece as well, yeah?
Yeah, we have like a spanakopita, which is like a spinach pie made of phyllo, which usually has cheese in it. And then there's a nostissimo version, a fasting version, which just has the spinach. But like I said, I mean, you can see... you can see the result of a society called America where people don't fast. And we're a relatively new country, when you think about it. But the experiment is over. We've had 200 years, and particularly 100 years of extraordinary wealth. And you can see how we cannot outspend our problems anymore. We used to think that if we had enough money, we can solve all issues. And the reality is you can't. You cannot outspend it. And we have to do what we need to make ourselves and our families and our communities healthy again. And when 100 million people have diabetes or prediabetes, and 50,000 people a year are committing suicide, and 100,000 a year are dying from fentanyl overdose and drug overdose, and so many people die from stroke and cardiovascular disease and diabetes, which is just the worst disease in the world. All of these things come back to an excess of just access to a lot of foods and a lot of struggles with delayed gratification. And for that matter, we haven't even talked about the addiction culture yet. But, fasting, it's amazing. The same fibers, the same pathways, the same areas of the brain that sort of deal with addiction are the same fibers used for food. And one of the most powerful examples I have in my ER of this connection is that I met a very sad case, a lady once who was dying of liver failure in her early 40s. And, this is not so atypical, the fact that an alcoholic would be dying from liver failure. But the reality was, when I talked to her parents about how long she's been drinking for, like, oh, well, she started drinking in her mid-30s. I was like, oh, this is very strange, because usually people who are alcoholics, they start very early on, which is also the reason why we try not to let people drink much alcohol until they're 21. The idea, among other things, is that if you don't expose a person to these hyper-stimulated drugs, substances, it doesn't imprint them as strongly. So a lot of people who are alcoholics, they've been an alcoholic since their early 20s. And now they're dying of liver failure in their early 40s or mid 40s or later. But in this case, she started drinking in her mid 30s. I was like, oh, this is very strange. I started asking more questions. Oh, that's funny. What, that's very typical, ma'am. Why, your daughter started in mid 30s. Did something happen in her life? And like, you know what? It's so funny. She had just finished getting gastric bypass because she was so morbidly obese, and she took up drinking. So what does this mean? So this person essentially has an addiction problem to food and is morbidly obese. You can see that manifests in their life, in their physiology, in their anatomy. They're morbidly obese. They get something through medicine that forces them to stop that. And what do? They convert it into another manifestation of sin in this case, which is addiction. And they pick up alcoholism. I can't tell you how many times I've told that story, and the nurse or the person I'm talking to said, my uncle went through the exact same thing. My aunt went through the exact same thing. And so what you start to realize is there's this incredible connection between this propensity to addiction and this mastery of the body, or not, and how we can go from one addiction to the next. And so there's a lot of things that resonate there. And as we as a country struggle with fentanyl overdoses at extraordinary rates, very sad. 50,000 people died in 20 years of Vietnam, and that was a national tragedy. We're losing 100,000 young people every year, to fentanyl. So if it's time to fast. There's so many reasons to fast, and this is just another way about how fasting can change your life and change the community that you're a part of.
Underlined is the emotional thought. As you're presenting the case, I can't help but think on more of a therapeutic end, right? Because that's kind of where I'm specializing, where I'm at. Especially also at Kairos, we really like to look at these holistic approaches as well. I can't help but just feel so sad for this person, because there's an underlying emotional issue that led them to obesity in the first place. They were eating their emotions, and then they were drinking their emotions. But because there is no connection with God, and not to say that that person was not a Christian, they may have very well have been a Christian, but to know Christ truly, intimately, is different than to know of Christ, or to know him based on how you're seeing, not how he actually is, and how kind and gentle and loving he really is. And I think fasting ties into that very well. When we begin to fast, which is, again, some things don't come out except through prayers and fasting. And then when they asked him, why don't your disciples fast? They said, well, there will come a day where they will. And yes, the Prince of Peace is still with us here today, but this is the time of fasting. And I think when the spiritual or the physical world follows that of the spiritual world. So if we want to get disciplined in the spiritual world, a lot of times we have to start with the physical world as well.
Sure.
And I think this is where your methodology and the diet that you're proposing comes into play as well, which is, I don't know, there's so much emotions also that you shed when you start to fast. And I do have a follow-up question on that. But before I continue with that, I want to let people know that, again, if you are looking for programs in therapy, if you're looking for programs in leadership, if you're looking for theology, Kairos Pacific University has incredible programs at extremely affordable rates. So check us out, check them out, and sign up. It's really just a great environment. Even the online classes, they're all online classes for the most part, but even the online classes has such a personal dynamic that is just wonderful. Okay, back to the topic at hand. My follow-up question to you in regards to the diet itself, how can people, actually, I think I'm shifting gears a little bit. I lost the question that I had earlier. How can people take advantage of this? Or rather, how do they go about starting this? What would be the catalyst for them to say, I actually want to start this?
Well, I think it goes back to maybe something you said just a minute or so ago, which is that if you're really trying to bring Christ into your life, we're commanded to love God with all of our heart, with all of our mind, with all of our body. And so if that's the mandate, there's just, imagine you had a meal with one person your whole life. You'd be like, oh, that's a really close friend,
Mm-hmm.
You couldn't help but get to know them through that experience. So what I mean to say is, bring Christ into your life and bring him into your life at all levels. And one of those core levels, as I mentioned, is through this cultural, physiological, scientific, tradition of eating and what we eat, when we eat, and how much of that stuff we eat. And so, let your cells resonate with the grace of our faith. And so if a person's trying to, take next steps, essentially, I think they need a little bit of training, especially if they're showing up as an adult and they don't have that cultural support. You were mentioning in Lebanon, they have food options that just don't have meat or dairy in them. They have maybe even restaurants that might have more options on a Wednesday, Friday, and know that they should offer more of X, Y, and Z during the Lents. Here in the United States, you have to be a little bit more intentional about it. Amazon helps with all sorts of needs. You can order things on your own. But in terms of that cultural support, we don't really benefit from that as much here in the United States. Although we're a Christian country, we've forgotten some of the mechanical ways, or some of the in the trench ways to sort of bring God into our lives. And so I think it's important to understand that there's like I said, there's a huge benefit for you and your families by fasting correctly. But if you're looking to start step one, I would start with Wednesdays and Fridays. Okay, Wednesday and Friday going forward for the rest of your life, you are not going to eat meat or dairy. Okay, and you are going to feel so excited about Thursday and Saturday. Okay, when you're going to eat all your favorite foods again, and the sun will rise again, and you will get there. And then at the same time, I would say that start with an 8-hour window where you're waking up, and the greatest challenge you have to overcome is saying, you know what, I'm going to get till 10 a.m. And at 10 a.m., you eat a little bit of food, and again, you are going to be like high on life at 10 a.m. And then you're going to finish up at 6 p.m. that day, and you're going to be like, oh my gosh, I'm going to I'm going to eat a little bit more food at 5 something so that I'm good to go at 6. And you're going to repeat this for a while. And then you start thinking about the quality of the food that you're eating. And then start incorporating that. And you're going to do a little bit of walking. And you just kind of slow boil into this. And if you can do this Wednesdays and Fridays for a while, then, you probably need to look up a calendar and sort of see when Christmas and Easter is this year and sort of jump into that. But at some point, you will be primed and ready for the 48 days. And people that do this lose 10% of their body weight in 48 days. They feel phenomenal. Their sirtuins are being released every day to heal their body. And again, we have not enough time to talk about all this, but their inflammation decreases, their blood pressure drops, their insulin sensitivity improves. They have these things called they release stem cells from their bone marrow that literally then travels throughout their body to find areas of inflammation to heal tendons, heal neurons, heal parts of your brain. I mean, it's all in the medicine and in this practice of doing it for God, and then God rewards us with some, you might say some instant gratification, in a certain sense. Or at the very least, by the end of the 30 or 48 days that you do it, you're going to feel great. And then it'll be time to celebrate, and you're going to eat all the meat in the world, and that's phenomenal. That's great. But all within this cadence of the church's calendar. And you will be reminded every day as you refuse to eat certain things and wait to a certain hour to eat as to why you're doing it. And you're going to be doing it for God. And if you can do it for him, then you'll be able to do other things for your neighbor. And it's all just going to realign everything. And it's going to really open your eyes. And sometimes in life, you have to fake it till you make it. So just trust that this practice works. Trust that there are heavyweights in the spiritual realm that have worked this out over centuries, if not thousands of years. And it's time to maybe give them a little bit of a chance. And I guarantee you it's going to change your life. And it's not me guaranteeing it. It's just a commandment that God gives us. Like I'm just echoing what Jesus told his followers. And I'm trying to remind us of what to do to go back to this first beginning. It'll change you. And there are certain people. There was a Dr. Conklin 100 years ago or so that read this passage, as you mentioned earlier, Rita, about prayer and fasting. Certain sins can only come out by prayer and fasting. He took children with epilepsy, because that's where that New Testament was being applied to. He took children with epilepsy that could not be healed, and he made them fast, and their epilepsy went away. And so now that's been modified a little bit. Now what they do is they give kids essentially just protein and fat, and they avoid carbohydrates altogether, and they sort of fast in that way. But that's a form of fasting, and all of this is to be used in our lives for the suffering that comes with this earthly life that we are all prey to, and we can get rid of some of that. There'll be other challenges, there'll be other tragedies, but at least it won't be 90% of them. And that's good enough. Tragedy will come no matter what, but let's get rid of the things that we can. And I think that's going to make your life better and the world around you a lot better too.
Speaking of that, I've been contemplating this recently. So I have cholesterol. It's like you can walk into my dad's side of the family and just offer up simvastatin to everybody, and everyone will take one. And that's what it is. But I've been thinking about it in more of this, in light of fasting and things like that. And I don't know if I shared this idea with you before. I may have in one of our calls, but I thought this. Okay, so God forbid I get 10 years from now, I'm not taking care of myself. I'm not really fasting. I'm not doing the stuff that I'm supposed to be doing. I'm not exercising. 10 years from now, the trajectory is that I would get a heart attack. And at that point in my mind, I'm like, typically you'd look to God and you're like, God, why did you allow this to happen? Right? That's the typical trajectory of things. And other people would look at me and say, well, she lived a good Christian life with Christ. Why did he abandon her? So now two people are asking the similar questions. One, the person who did get the heart attack, and two, the other people who have seen that person live with Christ. And God is so merciful that he will help us in this situation. He had helped me in that situation. But he can also look at me and say, where were you 10 years ago when every single day I gave you the opportunity to choose to make better choices through your free will, and you didn't? And this also is not judging someone who doesn't know. I'm talking about myself, right? Knowing all the information that I know, knowing things about nutrition that I know, knowing where to get resources on these things. It kind of falls into the same category. I'd be like, wait, hold on. Did I not give you these opportunities? Why did you not take them? So instead of 10 years from now, someone blaming God and saying, God, why did you allow for this to happen? Or the other people doubting his goodness to me because of my ignorance and because I did not make the choices that I should have, maybe start making the choices now. Maybe that would be a demonstrative of his love.
Amen. Amen. And, it's a fearsome thing to realize that much of the tragedy in our life was a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way.
Yes.
And that, we're not really victims of other people per se. We're actually more of a casualty of our own self-will.
Yes.
And there's a lot of empowerment in that too, because now that we realize that, what can we do to alter our future? But it requires some work as a result as well. And it's a theme again that is not very popular in today's society, where we get to be accountable and responsible. But by all means, it starts with, I guess, I wouldn't even say it starts with self-awareness. You have to start with humility to accept that paradigm is even what it is. And then from there, you become self-aware. And from there, you can do all sorts of things to change your life. But the first spiritual pass is really an exercise in humility to even accept that, because that's painful. It's painful to recognize that maybe some of the things that you faced or that others faced in their lives was a result of their own sins, of their own inadequacies, or their fail to excel in virtue. And it's not to say we don't all struggle with that, but it is to recognize, at the end of the day, there are some things that we can do to change the course of our lives, and it's time that we pick up our cross and walk. I mean, it's just, there's nothing easier to, it's easy to say, very difficult to do.
One of my favorite Eastern Orthodox prayers, Eastern Catholic prayers as well, is the Jesus prayer. Jesus, Son of the living God, have mercy on me, a sinner, and save me, which is supposed to be like a breath in and a breath out. And I think it goes well with what you're saying as well. It's this reminder that I'm a sinner. It's like this, with every breath that I take, I'm a sinner. I'm in need of mercy. And it's not meant like as a self-condemnation. It's more like God's mercy is so good that he can change me. And unless we're humble, like you're saying, there's no change. Change does not happen.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And sometimes you can't scream it enough. And again, in the ER, we see this all the time. You try to convince people that they need to change one thing or another in their lives. And, to describe it all as sort of pride versus humility maybe is oversimplifying it, but there is something there that if we all just recognize that we are inadequate, that we have weaknesses, frailty, that we are prone to human nature and its faults and frailties, and from there we can get strong. In your weakness, I am strong. I mean, and if we recognize how weak we are, we can reach out to the tools and to the techniques and to the pathway that will make us strong again. And the stakes are very high. The stakes are very high. I mean, this isn't just
eternity.
about
The stakes are eternity.
Stakes are eternity, and stakes are about life and death, and stakes are about how many children you have and who you marry and how you treat your parents and grandparents and your kids. And it's everything. So, it's
really
just, we need to take it seriously and we need to give it a chance. And so, if we can start with something like fasting, where we can really inculcate and press on the core buttons of ourselves to make spiritual change, that's at least one way of doing it. And if we have at least one mapped out way, why wouldn't we try that?
Oh, absolutely. You know what? You are so on point, and I highly recommend that people fast. And I'm not just saying this because you're here. I have to say that my experience with fasting has also been very much enriching in my relationship with Christ. And I think in my relationship with everyone around me as well. And there's lots more work for me to be done. There's lots more humility that needs to be acquired. But I think, as you're saying, fasting is probably the best place to start. There are so many other questions that I want to ask you. I know we're running out of time, so I'm hoping we can do this at another time again. But I want to ask you for final words. What are your thoughts? What's something you want to leave people with?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, we have to understand that that this life, there were three promises when we left the Garden of Eden. And those three promises to Adam and Eve were that there was going to be pain, there was going to be work, and there was going to be death. I mean, that was it. And I welcome the fact that we live in a society, in a time in human civilization, which has been very brief, by the way, but we are where we are, where a lot of those things we can kind of sidestep as a result of technology and wealth and the civilization that we live in, by all means. But we have to continue to remain raw and sober. We have to create things in our lives, no matter if you're a king or an impoverished person, that you can do something that reminds you of humility, that builds the virtues. And one of those universal tools and practices is fasting. It doesn't matter if your IQ is 160 or 80. It doesn't matter if you're 6'3" or 5 foot. It doesn't matter. All that matters is that you're a human being with an enteric nervous system and a Christian soul, and that you recognize that, through these tools, that we can bring a certain friction and a certain struggle in our daily life that allows us to allow that toddler to get care before us in the waiting room, that allows us to be there for Pascha, for Easter, for Christmas, that allows us to be productive and functional so we can support our communities and our families. And that for ultimately, but in another way, as it sort of scopes up and scales up, that we don't bankrupt our country and our next generation through healthcare expenses and daycare and nursing homes and all these things that we create to compensate for what is ultimately a spiritual struggle in the first place. and your life will be better. It'll be richer. It'll be more meaningful. And it starts with something as comprehensive and core as fasting. And if we're not doing it, we're leaving things on the table, not just spiritually, but physically for the temple of our soul. And there's a lot of other things we could talk about too, about what that means for your body. But, let us just say that 90% of all disease can be sidestepped. 40% of your years could be added on to you to see your grandkids and your great grandkids. And if you could just pass on that wisdom to them, and let your great grandchildren know when they have their first child that, yeah, they have a fever right now and they're doing okay, and they're probably going to be all right tomorrow. Why don't we just focus on rest for now? This type of small little wins in our lives add up to a nation that is strong and that can defend itself and that is financially solvent and has a tradition worth preserving. And so, all of this comes back to a very meek and simple Christian practice called fasting. And if we can just take that seriously, I think, every cell of your body would sing the grace of God, but also you yourself will be an example of that in your community. So there's a lot at stake here, but it's real enough to say we should give it a try. And here's the template to do it right.
Absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much for your words and your wisdom and your time. It was just absolutely incredible to have this conversation with you. If people want to find your book, or if people want to get consultations and start this diet work personally with you, or connect with you on social media, where can they find you?
Yeah, so we have a website called the athosdiet.com, and you can find the book there. There's links on Amazon and Walmart and other places to buy the book. It's also available to listen to. I have a very nice English accented gentleman who read the whole book out loud for me, so that you can listen to it on your way to work. And then YouTube, actually, we have a really great YouTube channel. There's probably 120 videos or so of 3 to 5 minute little monologues, me talking about meals and protein and all these sort of concepts in more detail as possible for people to really appreciate what it means to fast. And so I think between the book and the website and the YouTube channel, there's just a lot of good things there. And so that's where I would say next steps are to connect. And between those prongs or those ancillary resources, you can really start doing these things right and sooner than later.
So this is the YouTube channel for
Yes.
those who are looking for it. Lots of incredibly beautiful things here as well. Some videos, some shorts. You guys can check them out. And then I want to say,
Thank you, Rita.
For Instagram, let's find your Instagram there.
Yeah, I think it's the Athos Diet on Instagram. I'm not quite as active on there as I probably should be, but yes, it's there's some good things on there. I try to coordinate that on there as well. Oh yeah, the Athos Diet. Yep, maybe it's called the Athos Diet on Instagram. Is that my handle? Is that how people refer to it?
Yeah. This is it. This is the handle. I'm trying to hide like all my information because that's my personal Instagram.
And I finally just want to say this. It just as a normal human being that has a full-time job, 4 kids, a wife that works. I'm part of my community. I mean, this isn't like you have to go to Mars and purchase a hyperbaric oxygen chamber to benefit from. This is as accessible as it gets. And I'm a real person who's using these techniques every day, and it allows me to see more patients and do more things. And it's just something that we can use in our own lives. And I think it's only going to make things better. There just isn't a downside. There is no downside. It's just time to fast. It's just time to fast.
And this is also the website itself. Some of the story is on there, and I believe you've had also benefited from it. There it is. You lost 25 pounds over the Great Lent period as well. So
that's right. Remember, I was doing fasting since 7, but it wasn't until my mid-20s that, I really became, because I had to, as a medical student, research something medical, and I tried to connect it to my own heritage or my own practice. I was like, oh, fasting, let's do some research. And as I did research for 6 weeks on that, read a lot of papers, listened to a lot of wonderful, let's say podcasts on the topic, although there weren't that many then. I just entered this world of fasting. Like, I'm fasting all the time, but let's see if we can do it right. let's optimize these things. And I did that for Lent, and it was absolute game changer. And I've never looked back.
I love that. Okay, so for us, again, if people want to find Kairos, if you're looking into applying or anything like that, Kairos Pacific University, this is our website, kairos.aeu.edu. You can find out more about who we are, what we believe in, the faith that we have here at this wonderful institution. And there's some really good degrees, and it's really, really affordable. Honestly, it's one of those programs that's just, for the most part, is typically cheaper than a lot of other places, with a really incredibly kind faculty and a wonderful mission. And if they want to find us on Instagram, you can find us at Kairos Pacific University. So KPU _ California is where you will see us, and you'll see me there too as well. So that is it. I think, was I sharing my screen? I may not have been sharing my screen.
You were. I saw all those images. They were great. Very nice website.
Beautiful. All right, Dr. B, thank you so much again for being here with us
Thank you,
today.
Rita.
We loved having you on. Hopefully we'll have you on soon. Again, I want to explore so many other topics with you, and I'll let you know what they are after this episode, so that we can leave a surprise for people who are here next